Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today is another game from the Tata Steel 2019. This took place on January 20th, and we have Viswanathan with the white pieces against Mamedyarov with black. Let's take a look at how the game progressed. We have e4, c6, d4, d5. The Caro Kann on board. Vishy, being the soldier he is, marches forward with his e4 pawn and plays e5. Mamedyarov responds by playing c5, immediately countering in the center. Now, the main line in this case is typically bishop to f5, then we have bishop to d3, bishop takes d3, queen takes d3. But in the game, we did have c5. Here we have d takes c5, e6, preparing to capture on c5, knight f3, bishop takes c5, a3. Now black plays knight to e7, intending to swing this knight around to g6 where he can put pressure on the e5 pawn. We have bishop d3, knight g6 as intended. Again, everyone's favorite restaurant, white castles, black castles, knight to b2, knight c6. Now black has two attackers on this pawn. White only has one defender, which is this knight. So what does white play? Well, first we have b4 attacking this bishop. The bishop goes back, and typically there's been games where white plays bishop to b2, which provides the second defender for this pawn. And actually, Anand played this exact same position as black in 2018. His opponent had opted for bishop b2, and the game ended in a draw. But that's not what happens in this game. Anand decides to go for bishop takes g6, and we have our first new position. So there's two ways for black to capture. The first is with the h-pawn, and if black does capture with the h-pawn, black maintains the ability to do this classic French-like f6 break. However, that's not what happens in the game. Mamedyarov opts for f takes g6. And this provides the benefit of opening up the file for the rook. So white plays knight to b3. We have bishop to d7, rook e1, defending the pawn. a5, white responds with b5, attacking the knight. The knight has to move, so it goes to e7, where it can potentially jump over to f5. Next we have a4, defending this pawn from the bishop, and rook to c8. So let's take a moment and evaluate this position. I want to look at black's pieces first. Black has its rooks on the semi-open files. This is awesome. This bishop is probably black's best minor piece. It's pointing right at this king along this diagonal. This knight has the potential to jump into f5 and control a lot of squares from there. The only problem piece for black is this bishop over here. It's really limited by white's pawns and its own pawns, all of which are fixed in this structure. So now let's take a look at white's pieces. White has pretty active pieces. These knights are well placed. They're both controlling this d4 square. This knight is also defending e5. The rook is defending this pawn. This bishop can develop here, challenge the other bishop, or maybe it can come over here, place a pin on the knight, and potentially prevent it from moving. This rook can swing into the game as well, so white's position is also very comfortable. Now, let's see what happened in the game. We have bishop to e3, challenging black's best minor piece. Black doesn't really have much of a choice. He doesn't want to go back. We have bishop takes e3, rook takes e3. Now we have knight f5 coming with tempo, and white plays rook to d3. And at first I saw this move and thought, why are you putting pressure on this pawn which is defended by another pawn? What's the potential here? But when I looked at it, I noticed that there's one main pawn break in this position, and that is for white to play c4. And white is preparing to play c4 and have complete control over the d file if we ever have d takes c4. So we'll see that something like this happens in the game. The game switches from something that's slightly positional to something that gets a little bit tactical. In the game, we have g5. White plays h3, preventing any g4 ideas. Black plays b6, and white plays c4. Now, at first glance, let me ask you, does the c4 break work in this position? Feel free to pause the video and figure out if this is a good move. Alright, so for those of you who want the solution, you might think that c4 is good if black were to play d takes c4, then we have rook takes bishop, and this queen is under attack and white can just move his knight the next move. But obviously, black is not going to play that. Black is going to play rook takes c4. And how does white break through? Well, there's a nice tactic here with rook takes d5. And now, if pawn takes d5, we have queen takes d5, threatening both the rook and the king. The king goes to h8, we have queen takes c4, and now white is up a pawn, which also is a passed pawn. White will probably go on to win this game. So naturally, Mamedyarov did not opt for this line, but there is a threat he has to deal with. White has his queen and his rook hitting this bishop and pinning it to black's queen. So he has to defend this. He plays rook to f7. Next we have rook to d3 because now the rook is threatened by the pawn. Let's pause for a moment and evaluate the position. Black has a big problem with this bishop on d7 for 3 reasons. The first is that this bishop is pinned. If black ever moves it, black loses the queen. The second reason is black really can't move the queen too far because white has 2 pieces attacking this bishop. So the scope of the queen is limited to the defense of the bishop. And the third problem is, even if black invests a tempo to move the queen out of the pin, where's this bishop even going to move? It is well restricted by white's pawns here, and this structure is fixed. It's restricted by black's pawns here. The only potential future it has is to spend multiple tempi trying to come along and play on the king side part of the board. Congratulations if you follow those arrows. You are probably a Dance Dance Revolution expert. Now, another threat in this position is for white to capture this pawn here. So let's say that black made some passing move like king h8. Well, now white has ideas of capturing this pawn, and after queen takes pawn, we can grab the bishop. White is definitely better here. He has more material and some threats against the king, but a lot of the pressure and the problems caused by black's bishop have been resolved due to the series of exchanges. Anyway, Mamedyarov does not have a rating around 2800 for no reason. He sees this and opts to deal with this problem by playing g4. White responds by threatening the rook. He plays knight to d2. We have rook b4, and now h takes g4, going up a pawn. In this case, black cannot capture this pawn because it's defended by the queen. So black reroutes this knight to e7. The reason it's coming here is because he wants to swing it over to d5. If it can come here, it takes the bishop out of this pin, and maybe black can generate some counterplay. But unfortunately, this is too little too late, because white plays knight f3, threatening to recapture here, so the natural move is knight to d5. We have knight b to d4, rook f4, knight c2 threatening the rook, rook b to e4, and right here I want you to pause the video, white to play and create a decisive advantage for himself. What is the move? Alright, for those who want the solution, if you found rook takes d5, you are good. Because after pawn takes d5, queen takes d5 check, black resigned. Why did he resign? Well, because after a continuation like king f8, followed by a quiet move like rook d1, white's attack is too strong. Black can definitely try something like king e7, but after queen d6, king e8, e6, rook e6, queen takes f4. White is up too much material, will go on to win this game. And let's say that black opts for king e8. Well, same idea, this e6 push will eventually break the back. We have knight g5 first, queen e7, e6, rook takes e6, queen a8 check, queen d8, queen takes queen, king takes queen, and after knight captures rook, there's a pin on the bishop, so we can't recapture. It's also a fork, so we're going to pick up this rook as well. Absolutely crushing. Mamedyarov sees all this, throws in the towel, and we have ourselves the game. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to do all the YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in another video. Thanks.